Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Jason Davis here with you. Soccer Morning, January 13th, 2014. 13th day of the new year, the new calendar, 2014, the year of the World Cup. The year of so many things happening. Plenty of soccer to talk about here on a Monday morning. We are back at it at Soccer Morning. If you're not aware, we're running a campaign right now for 2014 to get us going in 2014, fired like a shot out of a cannon, so to speak. So we ask you to go to soccermorning.com and consider contributing to the new campaign here. Help us get going. It's a little like my FC, right? Kind of, except you don't get to pick the lineup because we don't have a lineup, really. But you can become a co-host. How many co-host spots we got left? I don't even know. I know we're 2/3 of the way through our campaign to our goal, which is a fantastic response. I cannot thank you guys enough. Those of you that have already stepped up, you are super fans. You're the true Soccer Morning acolytes, and I very much appreciate the support that you've shown so far. Now what I ask you to do, and now that you've already done your part, is to share it. You know somebody who likes Soccer Morning, go give them the link and say, hey, help out a little bit. Or if you know somebody who likes soccer but is not a fan of Soccer Morning yet, get them involved. Show them what the show is all about. Get them on board the train here. This is, as I mentioned, big show or big year in soccer. Plenty of things to talk about today. Big weekend we just came out of. Premier League action. Serie A action. I like the word action a lot. I say the word action a lot. Plenty of MLS topics as well coming up. Jermaine Defoe set to be announced today or introduced today. In Toronto as TFC's newest designated player. Rumor is that Michael Bradley will be there as well, although we'll find out. That's not been officially announced. If Toronto FC decides to bring in Michael Bradley and debut these two or introduce these two players at the same time, it will be a little bit of a surprise. Everybody knows Bradley's going to end up at TFC, but nobody quite knows where he is or if he's going to be involved in the unveiling. I saw video of Jermaine Defoe arriving at the Toronto airport, getting interviewed on the TFC's official YouTube channel. Hi, Jermaine. Welcome to Toronto. Talk about your move. I'm excited. I feel like a little kid. I'm not going to do a Jermaine Defoe accent. I'll spare you that. We'll get a real English accent here in a couple of minutes when Luke Moore from the Football Ramble joins us to talk about the Premier League weekend. Maybe I'll ask him. Part of the discussion coming out of the weekend, and for American fans, it's for American fans, for U.S. fans, U.S. men's national team fans, when it comes to Michael Bradley, it's a question of will Michael Bradley regress as a player? Is this going to mean he's less prepared for the World Cup? What does this mean for Americans in Europe, et cetera, et cetera? That's all out there. That's all to be debated and worried over. And we've had a little bit of that so far. When it comes to Jermaine Defoe, because he is still in the England picture, because he's still got a chance to go to the World Cup in Brazil with the Three Lions. The questions there are, is he selling out his opportunity to go to the World Cup because there's money in Toronto? And there's a particularly scathing indictment of Jermaine Defoe's motives by Daniel Taylor of The Guardian that got bounced around this weekend. I thought it was clearly uninformed on a lot of fronts, but then again, you can make the argument that Defoe's quote-unquote step back will affect his World Cup chances because it doesn't matter whether or not MLS is such a step down that he'll regress as a player. It's whether or not Roy Hodgson thinks that. In reality, I don't think Jermaine Defoe, in 3 months of MLS, March, April, May, is going to suddenly become a player who can't help England on the national team level. But that's what we're talking about. That's what we've got going on in this modern dynamic between MLS and the rest of the world. That's fascinating stuff. I almost care more about that discussion than I do about the actual players arriving, but that's exciting times for Toronto FC as they remake their squad. Now, and again, part of this is for Daniel Taylor. Part of it was how bad TFC's been over the last couple of years. 7 years, excuse me. How bad they've been their entire existence. They nearly made the playoffs one year. They got close. Every other campaign has resulted in disappointment. Last year was a particularly bad season, even by TFC standards, although they didn't finish last because DC United was historically bad. But I think what's missed a lot, and perhaps missed by Mr. Taylor of The Guardian is that in MLS, I know TFC has not shown this yet, but in MLS, you can go from where TFC was in 2013 to a playoff team and an MLS Cup contender in 2014. Will they win it? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they've got some other work to do. The jury is still out on Ryan Nelson as a head coach, but there is at least the possibility. This isn't a moribund club in England who's wallowing in the second division and shows no signs of coming out of it and doesn't have the resources to make a step up or is leveraging their future against one more promotion campaign, or a team that typically doesn't compete suddenly throwing money at the problem to try to make a difference. This is MLS, where parity reigns, where the salary cap is life, is reality, where you deal with these things, and you still have an opportunity to compete in the end. Tonight, the Ballon d'Or ceremony happening in Zurich. I'm fascinated by this too. And I don't care who wins. I don't care who wins. For me, I think Cristiano Ronaldo is probably deserving in this particular year. Franck Ribéry has a legitimate case, and Lionel Messi, when he is playing and healthy and in form, is the best player in the world. So it's one of those things. There's so much subjectivity involved. And I love hearing the rumors. Messi's not going to Zurich because he's heard that Ronaldo won. Okay. And in fact, I think Marca had, Bild. I saw a headline from Bild. I didn't read the story. Headline from Bild, or somebody reporting what Bild reported, that it goes Ronaldo, Ribéry, Messi. Messi finished third. Wouldn't that be shocking to find out if Lionel Messi finished third in the Ballon d'Or voting? Now, again, this is a bastardized version of the Player of the Year award. FIFA scooping up the Ballon d'Or name and making it their own. It's one of those things where, well, should we care? And does all of this drama surrounding the Ballon d'Or and actually handing the trophy to one of these individuals distract from the fact that we're living in a period of soccer, of football, where we get to see two of the best players of all time? Let's not forget that both Messi and Ronaldo are going to be legendary players when they're done. That they're going to be right up there with the greatest players to ever step on a field. And we get wrapped up in Messi versus Ronaldo. Now, rivalries make for better copy. Rivalries make for better interest. Rivalries make for people talking. But you don't have to diminish one just to celebrate the other. You don't have to push them up against each other, except for when they're on the field and it's a matter of securing 3 points for their team and perhaps another La Liga title. Speaking of La Liga, Atletico Madrid and Barcelona playing to a scoreless draw this weekend. A scoreless draw. Where's the goals, guys? Now, it was entertaining. Let's not act like it wasn't. But it was also pretty clear that as far as those teams that was cagey. That was, we'd rather not lose this game than risk something and perhaps fall behind in the title race, because that's how this is going to go down to the wire. You've got Real Madrid chasing both of them. It was an interesting match to see. You don't expect those two teams to produce 0 goals, but there are plenty of reasons why it actually makes sense. All right, let's shift to England. Luke Moore from the Football Ramble will join me on the other side of this break. We'll get into City going top, Liverpool-Stoke goal fest. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, Stitcher, TuneIn. It's all working. Talk to you in a second.
Let's begin.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
Hey, back on Soccer Morning and joined now on the phone by our friend Luke Moore from the Football Ramble. Hello, Luke.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Let's talk about some Premier League football from this weekend. And I'll start. I'm not sure this is there are several different controversies, as you might say, from the weekend that we could discuss. But let me ask you first: was the decision to disallow Tiote's goal, was that the correct decision for you?
When I first saw it, I was outraged, as I'm sure many of your listeners were. I thought it was a strange decision and a wrong one. Now, I think what's probably happened is the referees disallowed it, arguably correctly, but for the wrong reason. Now, I think he disallowed it because he thought it took a deflection from a Newcastle player who was offside, so he ruled out the goal. But in actual fact, what happened was it took a deflection off Martin Demichelis, the Manchester City defender. But then the referee could probably argue that Johan Gouffran, who was standing in an offside position, was arguably impeding the goalkeeper's eye line and therefore interfering with play. So it's one of those ones which is down to a referee's interpretation. I don't think Hart was saving it anyway. I mean, really, in the spirit of favouring the attacking player, which is what we're told is supposed to happen. Probably on balance should have been a goal, but I can sort of understand why the referee gave it.
Well, I mean,
disallowed it.
Isn't that feeling like we can understand why he disallowed it, but perhaps it should have been? I mean, doesn't that indicate there's a problem with the rule as it exists?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think these sort of things at the moment are down to the referee's interpretation. I mean, yeah, you could argue that it should be cut and dry, and all these rules should be, black and white, and that should be that. I think it's funny because you always hear people, certainly in this country, I'm not sure about your side of the pond, but where we are, we always hear talk of common sense this and consistency that. Well, it's very difficult to achieve both common sense and consistency at the same time.
Yeah.
If you want something to be truly consistent, then surely you need to make the rules completely black and white. If you want things to be open to referees' common sense, then you occasionally get things that happened yesterday.
And just another one of those instances, and there were a couple of questionable penalty calls this weekend as well that speak to the difficulty referees have in interpreting these subjective events. And the goal is a little different than perhaps any of these diving incidents or whatever you want to call them. But because the discussion immediately goes to, Luke, well, there's a foul, but it's also, embellishment. And at what point, where's the balance between, okay, do you punish the attacking player for selling it? Do you punish if there's a foul, does that overrule everything? Are you encouraging embellishment and diving if you don't punish these things have kind of consumed football in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario with the diving thing, because what will happen is, the referees or the press as well, will deplore players who dive or exaggerate contact and stuff like that. But then players will say, well, look, if I don't go down, I'm not going to get a decision. I've seen countless players in the past be fouled in the penalty area and either stay on their feet to try and get a shot away or get up again to try and get a shot away and then just not given the decision. So you can sort of understand from their point of view. I'm talking about exaggerating contact. I'm not talking about diving without any contact, because that's obviously essentially cheating. But if you can see why players need to exaggerate contact. If you're talking about the Sterling penalty decision in the Liverpool game yesterday, then it's just poor refereeing, really. I think the standard of refereeing yesterday overall was quite poor. I know it's a difficult job, but some of the decisions that were made were really sort of perplexing. And we should really have individuals officiating games who can see an incident and under duress and under pressure in the heat of the moment make the decision correctly, overwhelming majority of times. Now, of course, there's the occasional mistakes, and players make occasional mistakes, but by and large, a player is expected to make the right decision all the time. That's essentially what football at the top level is. They've all got a lot of ability. They've all got a lot of athletic prowess, but it comes down to the decisions they make under pressure at the highest level. And it's the same with referees. I mean, that Raheem Sterling decision, for a couple of reasons, was just an appalling set of decision making by the referee, and something that shouldn't really happen at the top level. I don't think.
Well, there was another incident in a game at the foot of the table, a game that most people wouldn't be paying attention to. Ended up Sunderland beating Fulham 4-1, and Josie Altidore sold some contact and earned a pin. Now, the game was out of reach for Fulham at that point. I'm not sure it would have made a difference, but again, it speaks to the question, the subjectivity of those incidents. There's a leg put out. He, whether he makes significant contact or not, it's hard to tell, and he goes flying through the air. Okay, well, is that a penalty? Whether or not it's a penalty comes into question only because he embellished the contact. Again, it could be a foul and embellishment, but it makes it difficult to have these discussions. Let's talk about Liverpool and Stoke. You mentioned the Sterling penalty. Was that an example of? And I apologize for not knowing who the commentator was. Said it was the best of English football. I enjoyed it. It was a fantastic game, but was it great football or was it bad defending?
It's probably a bit of both. I mean, sometimes bad defending can, make for a pretty entertaining encounter, and I suppose it depends what you're watching football for. I imagine a lot of Stoke fans weren't particularly enamoured with some of the displays, but for me, it was a really entertaining game. It was probably quite poor defending on a number of occasions, but it was quite a fast-paced, high-tempo game. I think one of those things is what English football's known for, and that's fast-paced. And, end-to-end stuff and a lot of chances. Yeah, the defender wasn't great, but that's part of it, isn't it? I mean, some of the Stoke defenders were pretty poor, but, they're playing up against good forwards, and maybe they're being pressured into mistakes by good forward ability,
Well, I think it's fun to see a team like Stoke, which obviously has a reputation and is trying to shed said reputation under Mark Hughes, whether they're going to be effective and win enough games to maintain their place and not fall into the relegation zone. All of those things are open questions. But it's good to see them in a game that they wouldn't be picked to win in most circumstances. Go out and play some football and have, give themselves a chance to score some goals against Liverpool rather than just bunker in and let Liverpool come at them. And then, we get a 1-0 win for Liverpool and everybody goes home kind of grumbling about how ugly it was.
Yeah, I think it's funny because Stoke have started to approach games slightly differently under Mark Hughes. And Mark Hughes loves playing against the big teams. He's obviously a player who performed at the highest level, was a really, really good player. I think he does seem to get motivated, especially by these games against the so-called big teams. I mean, in actual fact, to be fair to Stoke, they had more possession than Liverpool yesterday, and they had more shots as well. And they've taken on board their new manager's sort of philosophy, if you like, quite well actually. I don't think they did too badly. I thought that it was one of those games where we do see a lot in the Premier League where everything seems to fly. And it started off with a ridiculous goal, that deflected goal. Shot was going nowhere near the goal, and it deflected in. And after that, we sort of knew that it was going to be one of those types of games. Yeah, I thought they did okay. I think that Liverpool showed a lot of heart and a lot of desire to win the game because they haven't had a very good record at Britannia Stadium. I think that might be the first time they've beaten them in the Premier League era at Stoke. And Stoke have obviously came from behind to beat them last season in the equivalent fixture. So it was by no means a sort of foregone conclusion Liverpool were going to win it. We've seen big teams struggle at Britannia both under Pulis and now under Hughes. So it was an interesting one and one that Brendan Rodgers would be absolutely delighted to win because he knew he had a real tough game in his hands there, and they've sort of conceded 3 goals and still won, which he's got to be delighted about.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when you're Stoke, it is sort of bargaining with the devil. Either you go out and you play Pulis-style football and you maybe give yourself a chance to win. I mean, you make it very difficult to win at the Britannia, even for a bigger team like Liverpool, or you play a little bit and maybe open yourself up. And when you're talking about the attacking talent that Liverpool has, obviously very difficult. And we saw the return of Daniel Sturridge and the Sturridge-Suarez connection, and it was glorious once again.
It's huge for them because, although people will sort of at first glance think, Liverpool are all about Suarez. In actual fact, Suarez missed the beginning of the season, as we all know, through suspension, and Liverpool played really good football. They also played really good football at the end of last season when Suarez was missing, and Daniel Sturridge was a big part of that. And so to have him back is obviously a huge bonus for them. I suppose the difficult thing, all the disappointing thing to Stoke will be that they know how good Liverpool are going forward. So the one thing they didn't want to be doing was making mistakes and not operating and defending as a unit. And that's essentially what they did. I mean, I think they were shook a little bit by the deflected opening goal. They didn't really deserve to be behind by that stage. It was very early on. And I don't think they dealt with it at all well. You don't need to be making defensive mistakes when you're playing against a team like Liverpool, because they can score goals. They've shown that they can hurt teams from all over the pitch. So it wasn't ideal from that point of view for them. You score 3 goals at home, you want to win the game, don't you?
Yeah.
There's no way you want to be losing the game once you scored 3 in your own backyard. So they need to do a bit of rebuilding and hopefully try and restore their confidence ahead of next week, because they've got Crystal Palace away next week, and then they go away to Chelsea in the FA Cup, I think. So 2 important games for them.
Speaking of Luis Suarez, and again, Liverpool, not all about Luis Suarez, but when the man has 22 goals in 16 matches, it's impossible not to give him the lion's share of the attention. His pace, I mean, the pace that he's on is pretty staggering at this point. He doesn't, what's interesting about Suarez is, while, all of those things that make a striker fantastic in terms of movement and touch and how quickly he thinks on the field, it's the fact that he finishes every chance he gets that really is setting him apart.
Yeah, it's also, there's one thing you haven't mentioned there. I agree with all of that. But for me, the key thing about Suarez that you haven't mentioned is his hunger.
Mm-hmm.
So if he scores a goal in the first minute, he's still so hungry. He still runs all the channels, does all his doggies. He makes sure that he puts defenders under pressure all the time. And the amount of times you see him score a goal in the last 10 minutes where he's just chasing everything down, running himself into the ground, it would just be an absolute nightmare to play against him. I mean, England are going to have to play against him in the World Cup, I would have thought, and it's going to be so difficult. And how they deal with him is going to be key to their chances of doing anything in the summer. But every single team that plays against him, I mean, the goal record speaks for itself, but every team that plays against him, it just must be so almost mentally draining, because he never stops. He's supremely fit, supremely athletic, and his desire to win and to do well is really second to none. I mean, I know he gets a lot of bad press, a lot of the decisions he makes personally and the way he sort of conducts himself just through that desire to win. But he has improved on that aspect recently, actually, I have to say, in fairness to him. And he should, and that's good, because I like to think that hopefully long term he'll be remembered for how good a player he was and how much of a dedicated pro in terms of running himself into the ground. He should be remembered for that, really, if all's well, because it must be so hard to play against him. And as you say, finishing is just second to none, really.
Manchester City, we mentioned the win over we mentioned the controversial goal over against Newcastle. They win, they go top of the league for the moment. Arsenal taking on Aston Villa today with a chance, if they get 3 points, to get back to the top. But let me talk about Manchester United, who's down in seventh. They beat Swansea this weekend. An important win at home, and a matter of turning things around for David Moyes just a little bit. But it's interesting that even coming out of that win, there's still some question. I mean, I saw some stats, and we know how stats go and how they can color our perceptions of what happened. Swansea having more of the ball is, I guess, an issue. Is that an issue, Luke?
Possibly, but Swansea have a lot of the ball all the time. I mean, it's very much a hallmark of their play. I mean, the big stats that Man United won the game, they sort of, I suppose, weathered the storm, certainly in the first half. Swansea, I mean, you got the feeling watching the game, I don't think you saw it, but I certainly got the feeling when I was watching it that Swansea needed to make that sort of early possession count. They didn't really do that. Now, I mean, possession can be a bit of a misleading stat, because you can have the ball as much as you like, and Southampton did it quite a lot as well, but sometimes having the ball for the sake of having the ball, it really does depend on the areas you've got the ball as well, because a lot of defensive players will be reasonably content for you to have it 40, 50 yards from goal, because they know you're not really a threat depending on the players you've got. So I wouldn't see it as a concern hugely. I mean, Man United, it's been a bit of a season of media narrative, certainly in this country, because Man United are supposedly having this terrible season and all this other business. I mean, they're 5 points off the top 4, which isn't a disaster at this stage. I mean, obviously they're used to winning things, but I mean, to get into that top 4 in what is a period of huge transition for them wouldn't be too bad. They've won 5 of their last 6 league games. I mean, David Moyes was up for Manager of the Month for December, so it can be a little bit misleading to read the press going overboard and this, that, and the other, given that he's being asked to follow the greatest British manager of all time. And the final stat I wanted to mention, actually, was I saw that a Manchester United fanzine did a poll of United fans over the weekend, which said, would you like to see David Moyes go? Or would you like to see him stay in a job up to the end of next season? And I think only 7% of the fans interviewed or asked said they wanted him to leave. That's 7%.
Huh.
But, the Man United fans seem to be very much behind them. In the away game they played before the Swansea game, the fans were really vocal behind him, really supported Moyes, and that was great to see. I think they're going to find it difficult. They're always going to find it difficult. But they won that game 2-0. The second half they came out the blocks flying. They did well. They put Swansea to bed, and they move on to their next game now. Very much in touch with those top places. They've got a huge game next week. They go away to Chelsea, and then we'll see exactly how good they are. Stamford Bridge. I mean, their form suggests that they're actually not too bad. I mean, they've won 5 from 6, so we'll see how they get on.
Speaking of Chelsea, take out Hull City 2-0 this weekend, and Chelsea, for everything that's happening with Manchester United. You mentioned all of the narratives and sort of the criticism that Moyes has found himself subject to. Liverpool with Suarez and what they've managed to do so far this season and being as close as they are to the top. Manchester City scoring so many goals at home, struggling on the road, and then maybe finding themselves a little bit. I'm not saying Chelsea is under the radar, and I'm sure that's certainly not true over there. But Chelsea seems to be more going about their business than almost anybody else, without sort of these ups and downs and questions. Arsenal gets the constant question about whether or not their title chase is for real. Is this Mourinho's work, or is it just a function of everybody else having so many stories swirling around them?
Chelsea are a funny team. I mean, they had a situation where they lost to Stoke late on a number of games ago, and Mourinho was pretty upset about it. He came out and said that, we keep not killing teams off, we're giving them a chance to get back in the game. It's a real concern. We never used to do this. I don't know why we're doing it now. And you felt like that was a real tipping point for the players and for Chelsea to see how they would get on post that. They followed it up by beating Crystal Palace. They haven't lost since then. They've won 4 in a row now. I think if Arsenal leapfrog above them, you've really got a situation where there's a 4-point gap between the top 3 and then Liverpool in 4th. It's almost like it's a little mini league opening up, and it'll be between those 3 teams. The thing that Chelsea are having their luck of going down the home straight is that Mourinho is very much a winner. Now, of course, Wenger's won stuff in the past, but not for quite a long time now. And Pellegrini's obviously notable by not winning an awful lot as a manager. So if it comes down to that, you would say that Chelsea have a little bit of an advantage there. But it's so early to say, and there's hardly anything between them. I mean, if you look at Arsenal and Chelsea, they've got the same goal difference. There's 1 point between them, and Arsenal's got a game in hand. Mm-hmm. So I think if Arsenal draw this game tonight 1-1, they'll be the same points to Chelsea, the same goals difference, and the same goal scored. Something like that anyway. So it's very, very tight, and there's a lot of football to be played between now and the end of the season, and it really will become very interesting for the casual fan who could go, could experience going into the last week or two with 3 teams that could win the title, which would be brilliant.
That'd be amazing. Luke Moore from the world famous Football Ramble joining us, talking Premier League as he does. Thank you very much for your time, Luke. Enjoy yourself.
Thank you as well. Cheers.
I'll talk to you soon. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to shift to Italy. AC Milan will have a new manager. Who will it be? Don't go anywhere. We'll talk to David Amoyal when we get back. Be right back on Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
We turn now to Italy, and on the phone with us from Italian Football Daily, David Amoyal. Hi, David.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? I'm good. I'm sure you're ready to go and talk a little Italian footy on a Monday morning.
Fantastic. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
The lead story out of Italy today, David, is AC Milan making a managerial change. Massimiliano Allegri out. That's for sure. Do we know who's going to be stepping into his role?
As of now, it looks the front runner is former Milan player Clarence Seedorf. You know, fans of international soccer might know him for his time on the Dutch national team. He appears to be the front runner. He was set already to be the coach next season. Allegri's firing puts them in a little bit of an awkward spot. They're trying to anticipate his arrival now. He's currently playing in Brazil for Botafogo, but he has been the lead guy to take over at Milan next season. But because of Allegri's sacking, now they're trying to bring him in sooner. It appears there's a lot of momentum for that happening rather quickly. So sometime this week, they're already starting to name the people in his staff who would join either next season or maybe with him right now. So it appears he is the clear front runner right now.
The name I've also heard, I mean, I think everybody knew that Seedorf was in the mix, and as you mentioned, perhaps to step in next season. But the name I've heard recently after Allegri's firing was Pippo Inzaghi. Is he not a candidate at this point?
It's an interesting situation. He was definitely a candidate, but I think they were really thinking for next season more Inzaghi or Seedorf, and it appeared that recently they had decided to go with Seedorf for next season. So bringing in Inzaghi now, and last night there appeared to be some momentum for him to be an interim coach for the rest of the season. But for him, it would be a little bit awkward having a job when there's someone else that he was competing for next season lined up. And what if he did really well? So I think Milan is leaning towards trying to find a way for Seedorf to come right away. But it's definitely true that they were considering Inzaghi. I would say late last night in Italy, he appeared like the front runner, but it always appeared that that would have been on an interim basis. Inzaghi was coaching their youth team. He just took over that job in 2013. So it's not like he has much more experience than Seedorf. I kind of see both of them as almost equivalent as far as experience. But right now, I'd say Seedorf is the front runner to take over both in the short term and long term.
Well, you mentioned experience. Why would it behoove Milan? I mean, Seedorf is a legendary player, and was obviously a great at AC Milan. Why would it behoove them to hire a manager with zero professional experience coming straight from his playing career?
It's a great point. And I think, what a lot of people are trying to make a lot of logical assumptions on what Milan would do next. But when you look at their moves in recent time, I wouldn't say that logic is really the guiding principle. If you look, though, in Milan's history, two of their best coaching hires in the past 30 years came out of nowhere as well. Arrigo Sacchi, who was their legendary manager in late 80s, early 90s, he had just coached at Parma. He wasn't a big name. Granted, he had a little bit more experience than Seedorf, but it wasn't like he was a big name, and he turned out to be one of the best coaches in world football, I'd say, in recent times. And also Capello, who won a few Champions League at Milan, who then went on to coach Roma and Juve. He has a similar background to Inzaghi. He had been within the club as a youth team coach, granted for longer than Inzaghi, and he had learned a little bit under Sacchi. So I wouldn't say it's totally out of the ordinary for Milan to make these choices, with people with not much experience. I know Silvio Berlusconi has been very high on Seedorf for quite some time. He was actually trying to bring him in last season as well, before the season started. So he has been on their radar for some time, and he seems to be the choice of the president, while Inzaghi was more the pick of their director, Adriano Galliani, and I think he was really the one that was sponsoring more the move for Inzaghi. But I think the fact that they're going with Seedorf shows that Berlusconi and his daughter Barbara recently joined the board, now have more control at Milan.
Seedorf would be an interesting choice in Italy for numerous reasons, David. I'm not sure I even need to really explain what those reasons are necessarily, but is there a wider statement to be made by hiring Clarence Seedorf, or is it simply he is the guy for whatever reasons they want to come up with there with the Berlusconis?
Well, I think, one of the things that Seedorf has going for him is he has a Milan DNA. He was a player on the team for quite some time. He has an excellent reputation with the fans of the club. I think most fans were really burnt out with Allegri, wanted a change. While Seedorf doesn't have much experience, they can point to his leadership as a player that could translate to coaching well. As far as, hiring Seedorf, there was a coach of African descent who was at Genoa at the beginning of the season, Liverani. He didn't last very long. I believe he was the first one, of African descent to be on the team. I wouldn't say that Seedorf's, race is a factor really, but I think it has more to do with the fact that he was a successful Milan player, and they're kind of trying to rebrand the team with the success he had as a player.
Yeah, there's certainly no sense this is a token hire, and I don't mean to imply that. I mean, the guy's resume speaks for itself. It's just within the Italian culture, a lot of this now. Again, David, I'm not Italian and I haven't been to Italy, so I don't know any of this firsthand. But certainly the situation with Balotelli has gotten a lot of attention outside of Italy, and you wonder if there's some kind of connection there, if there's a statement to be made, if there's just a matter of again, this isn't necessarily about Balotelli, but you can imagine there being something there.
Yeah, I could see that. I can tell you from the reports that I read in Italy, the way I look at the Seedorf hire is more of Milan trying to discover the next great coach, which they did with Sacchi and Capello, and I think they're trying to bring a player, someone who had a great reputation with Milan fans, and they can kind of sell, okay, we're starting over with a coach who also is new, but he has Milan DNA track record with us. So I think, to be honest, that's really the main message that I take from that hire.
It's clear why Allegri was let go. I mean, at this point, AC Milan, I believe in 11th place, but close enough to, the absolute disaster of the bottom half that it makes sense that he would be let go. I mean, European advancement aside, the league has not been good, and the result that led to Allegri's firing was a 4-3 loss to Sassuolo, a game that they really had no business losing, and give up 4 goals to one player to lose that match. I didn't see the match myself, David. What exactly went wrong in that particular game?
It was actually a really exciting match. I can tell you, people think, of a Serie A in Italy as a defensive league. If you watched that match, you would have thought that was not a game being played in Italy. Milan had taken a 2-goal lead, and then Sassuolo came back with 4 goals. This 18-year-old player, Berardi, who plays for Sassuolo, he is co-owned with Juve, who controls his future. He was sensational yesterday. It's also interesting that Berardi grew up an Inter fan, so he took great pride in not only scoring 4 goals to Milan, but also getting their coach sacked. And I can tell you it's very rare for Milan to sack a coach during this season. It's something off the top of my head. I can't even remember the last time they did it. So I think for Berardi, the fact that he's an Interista and that his goals got a Milan coach sacked, that has to be special for him. It's also a great story. One of his teammates, Acerbi, had a relapse. He had testicular cancer in the summer, just had a relapse, and it was really nice. Berardi dedicated his part of his goals to him, so it was really a great story. Milan's defense had looked a little bit better recently once Bonera came back from injury, but yesterday it was really embarrassing what Sassuolo was doing. It was really an exciting game. I suggest anyone who can catch the highlights, I think they'll enjoy them.
At 19 years old, Berardi, and there, I'm always confused by player ownership and in Serie A, David, I'm not sure I want you to go through the whole process.
I don't want to bore people to death.
Well, it's just one of those things. There's a partial ownership and an option to buy, and all of these various odd things happening in Serie A. Is he destined to be a Juve player and a star for Juve, or is it a little bit too early for any of that?
Well, I can say, without getting too much into co-ownerships, Juve and Sassuolo co-own the player, but Juve is obviously a much stronger financially. So if they want to control, they essentially control his destiny. They had a similar situation with Giovinco when he was at Parma. So without boring people with details, we can just assume that Juve controls his destiny. Granted, he played very well in Italy's second division last season. He scored 11 goals already in Serie A this season, but it's a very small sample size. He is a very interesting player. I think Juve is going to wait and see how he does the rest of the season. I don't think it's out of the question that maybe they loan him to a mid-table team next season in Serie A so he can continue to play. He also could be, though, a nice offensive weapon for Juve, next season. Juve, though, does have Llorente and Tevez, who are actually playing very well, but they could maybe switch formation. But I think, it's safe to assume that Juve does control his destiny. He's a very interesting player. He was recently selected to Italy's under-21 team. With the injuries up front, with Giuseppe Rossi being out for a while and the World Cup being in jeopardy, I don't think it's out of the question that Berardi has an outside shot to maybe even making the World Cup. I'm not going to say it's probable or likely, but I also think with the way things are breaking for him, that there is a small possibility of that happening.
All right. We're running quickly out of time, David, but in about 30 seconds, maybe can you, first of all, was David Moyes, was he at that Cagliari Juventus was he scouting?
Absolutely.
Was he scouting?
Both Sky Sport and Gazzetta dello Sport showed pictures of him. Gazzetta dello Sport is the main sports paper in Italy. They tried interviewing him. He wouldn't say which players he was looking.
Okay.
I can tell you in the short term, they're looking at Cagliari center back Astori. He's been playing for Italy here and there. He's a Milan youth team product. I think in the short term, they're looking at him. We know Manchester United likes Juve midfielders, Vidal and Marchisio. Vidal just signed a huge extension with Juve. He's saying all the right things about staying. I think it's a long shot that Man United could land him in the summer, but they were definitely looking at him as well. But I think in the short term, they were looking at the center back for Cagliari, Astori, who I think would be a pretty decent fit in the EPL based on how he plays.
And very, very, very quickly, you mentioned Giuseppe Rossi. I saw something today that said 18 months. Is that what you're hearing, or is it much shorter than that?
To be honest, I've heard a lot of different things. At first, I had heard 2 to 3 months. He's now in Colorado seeing his own doctor, not the one with Fiorentina. To be honest, I've read a lot of things. I don't know for sure. I've read anywhere between 2 to 3 months to a longer potential injury. You really feel for him because this is his third major injury. As of now, I can't tell you, but I'll try to find out and tweet it later today.
All right, there you go. Make sure that you look for David Amoyal on Twitter. He's also with Italian Football Daily and GianlucaDiMarzio.com. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, David.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be on.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to shift to New York City football, soccer. Talk to Dave Martinez, our friend from EmpireOfSoccer.com. Don't go anywhere. It's Soccer Morning, North America's Soccer Network and NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
On the line with me now, New York soccer expert extraordinaire, Mr. Dave Martinez from Empire of Soccer. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Jason. Pleasure to be back on.
Pleasure to have you back on. Plenty of New York related news. I mean, we've got some news out of the NYCFC camp. Jason Kreis unveiled on Friday. I know you attended the press conference there. There's Xavi to Red Bull rumors that are popping up, which I think are fascinating. Let's start with NYCFC and Jason Kreis. I watched a little bit of that, or at least I went back and saw some of the archived footage. We knew he was there. We knew he was the head coach. What was the purpose of that gathering, do you think?
Listen, if you're going to have a head coach, you got to introduce him to the media, right? Now, no matter how late you may be in the game. I think that kind of took the shine away a bit from Kreis, the waiting game afterwards. We all knew there was going to be him. We all knew he was going to be installed already. So I think it kind of played out in the press conference itself, how a couple of questions were directed towards Kreis, but most of them were sent over to NYCFC officials, and a lot of questioning also with what the connection to Manchester City would be. Overall, I think that NYCFC did a fairly good job handling the press, handling the questioning. But I still feel that that you'd have to see them in action come 2015 to really get a good grasp of how much Manchester influence is going to be here.
Did they address issues that you and I have spoken about before, like getting out ahead of the branding and actually putting a New York City stamp on this team?
Well, it was a bit of that, but it was more about the style of play that they were emphasizing. Of course, saying what every big club nowadays says, we want to play a high line. We want to play attacking football. We want to be entertaining first and winning, and because of that, a consequence of that, have a winning team. So it's everything you'd want to hear as a fan. It's everything that Red Bull fans have been hearing for quite some time as well. But they're promising they're going to deliver that, and that they chose Jason Kreis because of his style at RSL. They felt that it was a very the styles that both the manager and the club have in mind mesh well together, and it should be a good complement to each other. He
certainly makes sense as a choice on that front, and I kind of gave the yak symbol because every team talks about this, Dave. But we have every reason to believe Man City. See, here's the problem. New York City FC will back it up with what they put on the field. We just don't know how they're going to get from point A to point B quite yet. You said, of course, most of the questions are directed towards the club as a whole rather than Jason Kreis individually. But in terms of establishing what, I know it's in the press release, but that's sometimes it's different in practical terms. What is he going to do between now and next season when he shows up on the sideline for the first time?
The more I got to speaking to the NYCFC officials, the more I get the sense that Kreis is invaluable to them as far as MLS knowledge. You could say that Claudio Reyna was in the league, but it was a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? Kreis knows the league inside and out. He knows how to maneuver around the roster. He spoke about having 3 DPs on board for 2015, so I followed up with that later on a one-on-one. And I asked him, well, you have this money now. It's fantastic. Real Salt Lake didn't have that kind of cash, so it's going to be a major influx for you. But how is that going to affect the rest of your roster? And he went on to speak about how equally important it would be to get the right people at DP and the right complementary parts. He knows that Manchester City's money is only going to be able to get him so much. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be up to him and his staff. I really do believe, though, Claudio Reyna says it's going to be between the two of them. I do believe it'll be under Kreis's leadership because he knows the league inside and out. He knows the players. He knows the mentality. MLS is a very different league. The Americans that play within the Major League Soccer have a certain mentality that Kreis can identify with. So I do believe that he'll be spearheading that roster change coming the next year, and he's very excited about it. He called it. He used a large word. I think he called it something like a revolutionary, which was large. I mean, he's very happy to be there. Very touched by the fact that he's gotten so much support from the family and the club. And I do believe that Kreis is going to be a very important part to this entire puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have no reason not to trust Jason Kreis's ability to put together a solid team that will compete from the outset, especially if you consider 3 DPs and the money that will be behind them. I guess then what's left is what exactly is Claudio Reyna going to do if he's not the guy picking the players? What's his job?
Oh, no, I think he'll be picking the players alongside Kreis. But again, I think a lot of it's going to rely on Kreis's knowledge. Claudio Reyna is a fantastic player, a fantastic leader, and he gives NYCFC, a New York, New Jersey son on board at the helm, which I think is the most valuable thing for them. That and an American face that people will recognize and appreciate with a bit of Manchester City background. So on many accounts, as far as resumes go, Claudio, he checks out a lot of the aspects that they're looking for. So I do believe he'll be involved. But I do, again, just getting to speak to everybody there, they're going to rely on Kreis, especially on Kreis, to evaluate the talent, to bring up the right recommendations, and to help form this team.
Also on the New York City FC front, is this the continuing stadium question? Still no idea where they're going to end up ultimately. No idea where they're going to play temporarily while they get that building, whatever building they can manage built. And the Bronx site is now, a lot of questions have bubbled up around that Bronx site. Dave, I know you've documented them at Empire of Soccer. What questions were asked and what questions were answered about the stadium situation for New York City FC?
It was interesting to see them. Look, first off, when you look at that location that they've chosen, it's really innovative. They've gone outside of the box. They didn't look for land that was readily available. They're trying to make a business deal here. And I think that was a very innovative move by them. They have the money to do it. That being said, the response that we got out of the press conference, I think most of the reporters got the same thing, is that they're not putting the whole ball of wax in one location. They're going to be looking at other places, supposedly around the other 5 boroughs. The CEO, Clarence Soriano, had said, Bronx remains the dream, the ideal location, his words. But they will look at other locations. Listen, anybody who's been around, once again, the Metro Stars, Red Bulls, the New York Jets, New York Giants, building in New York is close to or near impossible. What the Yankees managed to do over the last couple of years, a lot of it had to do with the type of political support that they had, and a lot to do with the fact that they are the legendary Yankees. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be an easy sell for NYCFC, no matter where it may be. Even some of the initial complaints or some of the initial protests from opponents of the site, asking for such outlandish things as access to the field when there's no play going on. Right. Things that for any professional club would be mind-boggling to even think about, to even ponder. So if they're starting off at that point, it's only an uphill battle. Again, if I were in NYCFC's position, I would fight for that location. It's ideal. It's a central hub. People know Yankee Stadium. It's a couple blocks away. It would be perfect. But they are keeping their sites open on other places. Well,
the objections that have arisen over that site and sort of the deal that was brokered by Bloomberg as he was headed out of office relate to, public subsidies, essentially, as they always do when it comes to stadiums. Did anyone ask if, okay, look, this is Sheikh Mansour, this is Manchester City money. They're not wanting for cash. Is there any sense that they would make up that shortfall, just pay for the whole damn thing themselves and sort of eliminate any of those concerns over public subsidies?
What I've gotten from NYCFC officials so far is that they will talk about money and about the investment they're willing to make within the club itself. But when it comes to anything stadium related, they're very guarded, and I think for a good reason. Okay. They're still at the negotiation table. They're still trying to figure out what they can and cannot get away with. I mean, that was really a sweetheart deal on the Bloomberg administration's part, and NYCFC would have been very lucky to have received it. I believe Giuliani, the previous mayor, had signed off on a stadium deal on the last day of his office. So people will probably, and I asked about this as well, how close were they to making a deal with Bloomberg on the final day of his tenure? And according to Soriano, they weren't close at all. So, it leaves that dream deal on the side, and now they have to deal with a mayor that is 180 degrees, just the polar opposite of what Bloomberg stands for. He's very much a revenues guy. And to have those kind of subsidies, it's just not going to fly.
All right, let's shift to Red Bulls before I have to let you go, Dave. There have been a slew of rumors related to Javi potentially ending up in a New York Red Bulls uniform. He's contracted to Barcelona through 2016. We know the rumors are that Thierry Henry has been pitching him on the idea of coming stateside and playing in MLS. I know you've written up this particular rumor. It would be huge for the Red Bulls, no doubt. Is it really something that they would consider? And do you believe that there's really some smoke here that could lead to a little bit of fire?
Well, I'll give you what I have. What I've gotten confirmed so far is that there may have been, and there's a very good chance that there may have been contact between Henry and Xavi at one point. There is a very good reason to believe that Xavi's agent is currently in Florida. That's according to a couple of sources that I have on board, and I'm working on a couple of different things on that end, which I should have on Empire in a little while, just to clarify a bit of the rumors out there. Now, I do believe that if anybody follows Barcelona out there, Barca stuff on Twitter, fantastic, follows the team, is constantly with them. He does say that there are negotiations going on with Xavi and the Red Bulls, and listen, if that Twitter account says it, and I know it's tough to cite a Twitter account, but that is one that's fairly well trusted. That's on one end of the spectrum, and I'm hearing other things as well, where it may not be as close as people may assume. Again, smoke, there's fire, absolutely. We saw Michael Bradley come aboard, right?
Sure.
Jermaine Defoe. So in this world of Major League Soccer, anything seems possible.
Yep.
But I should have an update on Empire later on today.
There you go. EmpireSoccer.com for your update on the Xavi 2 Red Bull situation. As Dave implied, suspend your disbelief in the modern world of MLS. It's all out there. It's all possible. Thank you for your time, Dave. I appreciate it a lot, man.
No, thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to shift. We're going to stay within MLS, but we're going to shift to the 2014 MLS Superdraft. We'll talk to draft expert, college soccer aficionado Travis Clark from Top Drawer Soccer in just a second. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Morning, NASN.TV. We are joined now by Travis Clark from TopDrawerSoccer.com, curators of all things college, youth soccer. They pretty much keep an eye on all those kids you know nothing about yet, but they're going to be superstars in about 5 years. Travis, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the glowing introduction.
I said that your site does a great job. I haven't actually gotten to you yet. No, I'm kidding.
That's fair.
I'm just kidding. Travis is he's the Mel Kiper of MLS, is what we've established, and with much better hair. Let's be honest about this. Mel Kiper's hair is strange. So Travis is here. We've got the Superdraft on Thursday. Right now, Combine wrapping up today. Is that right?
Wraps up tomorrow. Last set of games. It'll be players' third game in 5 days. So I don't know how much more you can learn from that, but to wrap up tomorrow, draft's on Thursday.
And speaking of the combine, look, it's a short window for scouts and technical directors and coaches to go out and see these kids firsthand. But by this point in the process, the decision should pretty much be made. I mean, maybe we're talking about a kid who gets a shot at the very end of the draft. Maybe we're talking about a kid who, it piques interest a little bit, moves up a couple of spots. But really, all the scouting should be done, right?
Well, yeah, you don't want to base your decision 100% off of these scrimmages where players are playing with teammates that they've for the most part, never played with before. And soccer is a particular game where it's hard to really excel and put your best foot forward there. And then, you can talk about lack of sharpness because a lot of players haven't played for a couple of months. So, it's kind of an odd duck, but at the same time, for some coaches, they'll get to see players, one more time, maybe some for the first time because assistant coaches have done the scouting. So, it's a mixed bag, but in the same way, getting to talk to players, the player interviews and sort of I don't even know where to describe them. The drills they run through that, they measure players' vertical leap and all that stuff, which doesn't tell you the whole story, but I'm sure teams factor in some way. So there are little good things about that, but the soccer itself is never that great. And from what I'm hearing, it's, pretty subpar as normal, quote unquote.
Yeah. I wonder before we get to talking about this year's class of players and who we expect to be drafted on Thursday, where in the process, I mean, if you had to imagine, starting from scratch on one end of a spectrum and on the other, a completely efficient scouting method throughout American professional soccer, specifically MLS, where on that scale is MLS right now, 18 years in?
I mean, I think it varies from team to team. And, I don't know exactly the extent of every team's scouting network, but I do know, I saw Seattle come out to DC for some games. I saw them at Georgetown. I know that some teams hire like a network of scouts where they have people that they trust and know in different corners of the country. I think Sporting KC, from what I know, does a pretty good job with that. And then other teams just kind of rely on postseason, sending out assistants to various games. And, everyone has contacts in the American soccer community. College coaches are known commodities, so they can call them up and get some feedback. So college soccer is so difficult to scout because it's so spread out that it would take a huge investment to, make it sort of a tip-top thing. I mean, you look at youth soccer as well, that a little bit of element is that makes it even more complicated because youth soccer is all even more spread out. So, it's slowly but steadily evolving, but at the same time, a lot of these elite players are already heading into MLS, be either Generation Adidas or homegrown deals. So, if that answers your question, I hope it does.
Yeah, no, I think that gives us a good picture. I mean, obviously, this is going to be a work in progress for a very long time, and that's as much a function of sort of the breadth of American soccer and the kids playing it as it is MLS sort of growing into the thing. And again, we're gonna avoid any questions of what the Superdraft, how relevant it will be down the line, but that can change as well, and that may factor into how teams go about scouting versus sort of taking in all the college soccer happening. But for the time being, these college kids drive the draft. You've got a super draft coming up on Thursday. Is there a consensus number one? Do we have a guy out there that everybody points to and says he's the player that DC United should be taking?
Well, when we're talking the actual pick itself, there isn't, because if you follow the people on Twitter who are at the combine, unfortunately I'm not there, but Andre Blake is kind of everyone saying, well, he's the top prospect. So if you're looking at DC United, they have Bill Hamid, the homegrown goalkeeper, so they're not going to go ahead and, unless they decide to surprise everyone and pick Andre Blake. But he's the guy, he's going to be number one on our big board update before the draft. And he's the guy who seems like has the highest ceiling. For DC United, you're probably looking at three players. If they keep the number one pick, mind you, you're looking at three players, either Steve Birnbaum, Christian Dean, both defenders from Cal, or the local, quote unquote, he's not really local, he's from Louisiana, but the Maryland striker Patrick Mullins. So it's pretty difficult to predict, but if I had to put money on it, I would say DC trades a pick. If they hold it, I would pick Birnbaum if I were them, but that's just me.
And I guess, as with any draft, and American sports fans are certainly familiar with drafts, the NFL draft being the biggest among them, it's always that thing about best player versus need. Your big board is obviously the best players. You rank Andre Blake first overall, but that doesn't mean he's going to be going first, because again, DC United may not feel they need a goalkeeper. So they've got a young goalkeeper in Bill Hamid. So unless they sell him, out of nowhere, right, it would be odd to pick a player like that. But when you kind of go down the board and you look at some of these teams that are maybe a little bit more complete than DC United, or have either made the playoffs last year or certainly right there on the doorstep, do you find that it's more important for these teams to pick the best player available simply because of the depth of the pool, whatever that may be, or is need really the way to go when you're trying to build a team that can compete in MLS?
If I were drafting and making my decisions, I would always try to aim for the best player, because the sharp we can discuss the sharp contrast between your MLS draft versus NFL and other pro leagues is that the talent of the pool of players you're looking at for those leagues, for NFL, NBA, is primarily the States, whereas obviously soccer being such a humongous global sport, you can if you need a forward, you could go and buy a forward from somewhere, or scout South America, scout in Europe, whatever. So if you're looking for if you're looking at it in that option, you would go best player available. Especially this year, you have a lot of center backs who I think are capable, would improve team's depth. So if you're picking late first round and there's a good center back out there, even if you don't need a center back, that's what I would do. At least with this class. It can vary from class to class. Depends on Generation Adidas deals, when they come off the board, that kind of a thing. But for me, it would be best player available for sure.
In terms of the strength of this class, where does it rank in over the last, in comparison to the last couple of classes, and how impacted was it by the GA signings, by homegrown signings, kids who would have been drafted at some point maybe this year and won't be because they've been signed by their local team or their academy teams?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's really hard to stack it up, against other drafts. I kind of rate it as a class that could end up contributing more players to make a roster, i.e. more squad players, but not a lot of, impact players the first year. There are seniors out there that are going to play this season and going to make a difference. I would think that we're going to see another Dylan Powers type rookie of the year, where we have a senior as the rookie, not necessarily a GA player, because Blake aside, there's a lot of potential and upside, to use buzzwords, about the GA class, but not necessarily guys who are looking the part to step in and play right away. Whereas for the seniors, you look at Steve Birnbaum, Patrick Mullins, Coastal Carolina midfielder Pedro Ribeiro. There's a lot of guys, Kyle Venter out of New Mexico. A lot of those guys who could compete for minutes, but those are all guys who have played 4-year careers. But looking at the pool, there's obviously a little bit of a drain if you could think that guys that have signed MLS homegrown deals would be available in the draft. A Jordan Allen would be a top 5 pick. Someone like Jalen Robinson would probably be a first round pick if he's coming out. Sean Okoli, Aaron Kovar, 2 other guys signed. They're also probably going to be first, second round kind of talent, especially. And then, Chicago signing of Harrison Shipp. He had a great season, so his stock would have been super high. So there is sort of that little diminished selection because of these ties, but at the same time, there's still going to be players out there that can find. I think the homegrowns, for me, impact the GAA class more than sort of the overall level of talent, if that makes sense.
Sure. The player, you mentioned his name, from Louisiana, played at Maryland, Patrick Mullins, back-to-back Herman Trophy awards for the forward. He is he seems like a kind of a can't miss prospect based on his college credentials, at least to the layman, somebody viewing it from outside. Clearly, that's not always the case. Is he going to be a star on the next level based on what you've seen out of him so far?
I wouldn't go ahead and say that he's a star. necessarily. Like, he's not a bona fide, like, slam dunk, this kid's going to be a great MLS player necessarily. I think, if you compare him to Schuma, his teammate who's on a GA deal, Schuma has a lot, maybe possible more upside. However, Mullins is going to make it in MLS, and I think he'll be a solid player. I just don't know, are we talking like U.S. national team looks in the future? Or are we just talking like...
Sure, why not? Why
I'm
not?
not going to go that far.
Okay.
I'm not that bold. But here's what, I've watched Patrick the last 4 years. I'm not going to... so I'm very familiar with him, obviously. But one thing that strikes me about him, when you look at players making the jump who are forwards, sometimes, are they going to be able to do the same thing? Like, are they going to be able to take advantage, finish the chances at the same sort of rate? But one thing that strikes me is that forwards who can also play out wide tend to stick just because there's that versatility. So if it doesn't quite pan out for them up front, they could be a wide player. And I think, that's where Patrick will have his success, at least maybe even in his first year. If the striker thing doesn't work out right away, you throw him out on the left wing. He's got a great left foot, and he'll do the dirty work. He's a great kid, good character guy, just an all-around sort of, good kid. So I think if it doesn't work out for him right away, he's going to work at it. He's going to put in that time and that effort, work with his coaches to figure out, okay, how do I, crack this thing? How do I score goals at the MLS level? And wherever that kind of ends up will sort of determine his projected trajectory. As
I'm looking at it's all right. I'm looking at the most recent. I think it's the most recent mock draft from Top Drawer Soccer. You've got Patrick Mullins at 7 to Vancouver. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts here to try to put together a mock draft. But Vancouver, a natural landing spot for a player like Mullins, and considering that they may lose Camilo, they probably will lose Camilo at this point. They've got their own, but they also have their own youngster in Omar Salgado, who is yet to come good in MLS yet. Where would he fit in that team? And do you imagine him sort of being a bench player? Well, I mean, I don't expect him to start from day one, but how much time would he get in a place like that?
I think it depends on his ability to play on the left side, and it depends on what kind of formation Carl Robinson decides to put out on the field. That'll determine it. And in 4-4-2, I would expect him to play as a left midfielder sooner. Like, I think he'd start in most places as a bench player. He's not going to be in your opening day lineup unless preseason goes super well and he starts banging a bunch of goals. But he's somebody I think who would kind of start on the left mid, and then as he, if he shows he's able to do the defensive work rate and then starts popping up into spots and scoring, maybe he gets moved up front. Obviously he's going to be on the left somewhere, and I think he'll eventually be able to transition to up front, but he's not going to be like a lone striker he's not really that target man, hold up kind of guy.
All right, so we've got a couple of days left until this super draft. And they continue to call it a super draft. I'm not sure what that means necessarily anymore. And the last thing, from a big picture perspective, last thing I'll ask you about this draft. And by the way, Michael Bradley being unveiled at Toronto FC right now, this minute. Don't go watch that. Listen to the show, but just letting you know.
I'm sure everyone's paying attention to me now, right?
Yes. Well, the last thing I'll ask you about the super draft and the big picture is, because of those homegrown signings over the last couple of years, and because of the questions about the diminishing importance of the draft, MLS has sort of tried to inject some new types of players into the mix to kind of boost it up a little bit. We've seen foreign players on loan included in the draft before. Is that something happening this year? We've seen that we've got the Caribbean Combine happening, and a couple of players signed to contracts out of that, as far as I understand. How does all of that stuff, what kind of impact does it have on the draft for you? Is it going to be enough to keep the draft as a major and integral part of building a team?
It's hard to say. The international signings I find, or the international, I don't even know if they're signed necessarily contracts before the combine or before the draft. But if you're looking at those players, I feel like those players, if they're pros already, should be scouted and signed by MLS or by a specific MLS club. I mean, why inject them into the draft process? It's a little puzzling to me why it's done that way.
Right.
I think it'll probably boost the draft, but I still think that these coaches probably be a little skeptical about picking and using an international spot on guys they've seen at just this combine. So I know that there's more that goes along in the behind the scenes, and I'm sure videos being shared and whatnot. But I think an interesting element when you consider college soccer is that a lot of international players are coming to play college soccer because they're like, well, I'm 18 years old. I could sign a like a pro deal with a second or third division club, or if my English is good enough and I have the schooling background, I'll go to the States and play for a couple years, maybe 4 years, get a degree. Someone that comes to mind specifically who turned down a GA deal was Leo Stolz from UCLA. He's German, probably would have been the best prospect, giving Blake a run for his money in this group, especially with the GA status. But I think that combined with the internationals they bring in could end up adding a little bit of a different intrigue to the draft. There's always going to be that stigma over international status and whether to pick a player from either college or a Caribbean combine. Are we going to burn an international spot on that, or are we going to trust our scouting network abroad to bring in seasoned pros who are in their late 20s, early 30s, that sort of a thing? So I'm still not quite sure how it'll fit into the draft, and the success rate, Joao Plata aside, no names really jump off the top of my head of players that have really, made that transition work. So it adds a different element, but it's always difficult to then project a player's success in MLS based off of coming to the league by this process.
Yeah, you mentioned Joao Plata. Even that was just a mess. Toronto FC drafting him, not exactly knowing what the situation was.
Yeah.
Completely confused as to his status and the international spot he was going to take, and the fact he was on loan. A whole mess there with MLS trying to inject that, and that was 3 or 4 years ago at this point. So Superdraft on Thursday. Travis Clark will be there covering it for TopDrawerSoccer.com, and he's our expert here. Thanks for your time, Travis. I appreciate it, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
I'll see you on Thursday. I hope.
Yeah, hope to see you there.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up this edition of Soccer Morning with American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, Kick TV. Stay there. No.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
How strange is it that Toronto FC is the most talked about club in Major League Soccer right now? And not for bad reasons, for good reasons. For holy crap, they just paid for Jermaine Defoe and Michael Bradley, and what the heck is going on here? What the heck is happening? Big time stuff happening in Toronto right now. Michael Bradley, Jermaine Defoe unveiling up there in Canada. Michael Bradley talking right now wearing a snazzy black shirt. Yeah. Jermaine came in the suit. Michael came a little more casual, but it's a black. He from the camera shot that we've got, it looks like he's like mall security or something. I mean, I'm sorry, Michael, but come on. Do a little bit better, man. Wear a tie at least. Maybe he's wearing a tie and I just can't see it because it's black. Maybe it's black on black. Maybe he's pulling that off. He's not wearing a tie. Oh, come on, Michael. Come on, Michael. Again, how strange is it that it's Toronto FC that is driving all of this attention right now? I mean, good for them. Good for Toronto FC. And I know there's a very small contingent out there, very small, who don't think that the United States and Canada should be sharing a soccer league. And for those people, I'm sure anything Toronto FC does, who cares? It's terrible. Get them out of our league. But for the rest of us, considering the way that they came onto the scene in 2007, sort of the trends that were set by Toronto, the massive response that they got out of their fan base for a team that nobody knew if that team was going anywhere. It took them forever to score their first goal. Danny Dichio, 24th minute of whatever game that was, throwing the seat cushions on the field at BMO Field, and it was turf, and but at the same time, Toronto brought something new to MLS. Them being good would be good for MLS. I really believe that. Again, and I think that you should even kind of push aside the whole the best American international is now playing for a Canadian team. That doesn't have anything to do with this. He's still back in MLS. I mean, he's playing in Canada, but he's back in MLS. Michael Bradley back in MLS, going to be making a difference. Both of these guys, and then I'll come back around to the thing I started the show with a little bit. Sort of the perception of MLS, especially in England, that Daniel Taylor piece about Jermaine Defoe selling out. What's his motivation? No, it's pound signs, the currency. And I'm sure that a lot of people, cynical people, are saying that Michael Bradley's doing it for the same reasons. But look, we can't crawl inside their heads. We don't know exactly what they're thinking at all times. I honestly believe that it's possible. Yeah, these guys are getting paid. Let's not beat around the bush with that. They're getting paid. But I think it's possible that both of these guys see MLS as a challenge in their own special ways, whatever those ways are. Okay? Michael Bradley, because this is the league that spawned him, because his dad coached here, because it's the league of the United States, whether he's playing in Canada or not. And for Jermaine Defoe, wants to get off the bench, wants to be the man. Now, for Jermaine Defoe, would it make sense to go be the man at, I don't know, pick your lowest possible Premiership team or pick a second division team? He's not going to get paid this way at those clubs. So there's that. So why not be the man in Toronto, which is a cosmopolitan city, which has a lot of things going for it. He's not going to some backwater. He's not going to, and neither is Michael Bradley. They're not going to some backwater. This is Toronto. This is as big as you can get in Canada, clearly, but it's on par in a lot of ways with most cities in MLS outside of New York and LA. So I don't know why we seem intent on throwing the most cynical viewpoint of motivation on these players. Then, will they both turn out to be terrible because they're playing for Toronto? I guess that's a real question. I guess that's a real question. I guess Jermaine Defoe can't possibly help England in the summer because he played at Toronto for 3 months. I guess Michael Bradley is just going to stop being the most important American player because he played for Toronto. Come on now. Stop it. Stop it. Right. I'm going to remind you, soccermorning.com will redirect you to our Indiegogo campaign where you can help support the show for 2014. We are doing gangbusters right now. Fantastic. The support has been brilliant. We just need a little bit more. We need that extra push. And this is the point in the campaign where we need you to help push it out further. We can only do so much. We can only push it out to so many people before it starts to hit a natural wall. So we need you to help us out. Send it out, put it on your Facebook page. Let your soccer fan friends know that this show exists. And if they already know it exists, let them know how they can help us out. Because the goal here, again, we want to keep it going. We want to keep rolling into 2014. We want to make this show as big as possible. We want to be the type of show that can get Michael Bradley in an interview, like next week. Like Trevor can maybe happen. I don't know. That's the kind of show we want to be. That's the kind of show Soccer Morning aspires to be. We have our own motivations around here. We could pick up and go to Europe and try it out over there, or we could be all Europe all the time on this show. I guess we could do that. Would that be selling out? Would somebody give us $6.5 million to do that? Probably not. That's why we need your help. Soccermorning.com is where you need to go. iTunes, ratings and reviews help us out a lot in terms of getting up there in the rankings. More people see us. What else? Twitter, Soccer Morning. What else? Give me something. Okay, let's get out of here. Thank you to our guests today, Luke Moore, David Amoyal, Travis Clark, Dave Martinez. We'll talk to you guys on Tuesday. Bye.